Hey guys, it's Joe and Justin with Tuning Tuesday, episode 39. Justin just got back from a little mini vacation, got a little sun rays in his hair, keeping his hair all stuck up and whatnot. Not too much been going on at the shop besides just hammering out work and stuff like that. No real new projects. Do we have an ETA on that manifold test video? I know that we had mentioned it a little bit last week.
We are possibly, we are shooting to release the Coyote intake manifold shootout video this week, along with the story to go with it. We're working with Steve Turner at Ford Next. A lot of little moving parts that have to come together, but the testing is done. Just so everybody knows, it is all of the commonly available plastic OEM and Ford Racing intake manifolds is what the shootout consists of. So none of that billet messiness, welded messiness, whatever. We'll save that for the real crazies.
Exactly. Do you have anything that you want to touch on before we go into taking questions or anything like that?
Oh man, like you said, it's been it's been busy around here, but it's the usual for us. Mm-hmm. The video with the Gen 3 on the 13 GT500 is coming out, so all the dyno testing with that, and we use Boostane on the 13 instead of using C16 like we did on my 12. The 13 had long tubes. I see a lot of, I'm starting to see people post numbers and dyno results, and everybody's kind of getting out of the summer mode and getting into the racing mode. So I saw Tony Luceri ran a 10.0 on his Gen 3 VMP powered car.
Nice.
So I was kind of changing topics there, but what I'm saying is that maybe we should get some content from our users, because they're out there doing stuff too.
Nice. I guess we'll start off with this real quick. Get it out of here.
We're going to do a little educational session here. For
those, I assume that most of our people that are watching would kind of know this, but for those that don't know, this is an 18 intake manifold. There seems to be a lot of confusion about like vacuum harness and how stuff needs to be hooked up in order to get an 18 intake manifold working properly on a car. And
for everybody that's maybe under a rock, everybody's putting the 18 intake manifold onto the 17 to 11 cars because it performs way better. And we do the tuning, we make the adapter harnesses, and everything to facilitate that use on the older vehicles.
Exactly. Something that's a little different with the 18 manifold that you don't see on 11 to 17, or that you see on 11 to 17 intakes, it's not present on 18, is how the vacuums is applied to the vacuum canisters to get them to open and close properly. The 15 to 17 intakes have like a little vacuum hose that's like routed through the intake and comes out the front and has a connection that connects up here.
So it's a hose.
It's a hose.
So you want to hook it up to something because it's a hose.
Exactly. Whereas on the 18 manifold, you have a solid connection that runs all of this.
Traditionally, a solid connection means a vacuum source, not a vacuum receiver.
Yep. Whereas this is a vacuum receiver that normally picks it up off like the aspirator hose assembly. But I've seen people cap this, and it does not get capped. It gets vacuum referenced to maintain the function of the IMRCs. Otherwise, your IMRCs are stuck open constantly because there's no vacuum to close it.
These big, ugly things on the back of the intake manifold are vacuum motors. There's a solenoid right here, which on 18 up, there's only one solenoid.
Yep, instead of two.
And so when you swap the 18 intake manifold on 15 to 17, it uses the vacuum, the solenoid opens up, and these vacuum motors open up the IMRCs, which that's a whole nother discussion we'll get into, but that's what Joe's talking about. If you don't have everything hooked up, then the system doesn't work right, and you wonder why your car gets codes and doesn't run well.
The other thing is people get confused that everything ahead of the throttle body, so your cold air intake tube, your MAF, and your filter, it's under what we'll call vacuum, but only because of pressure drop across the air filter. It's not under engine vacuum. And when people are hooking things up to vacuum, I've seen guys hook this we tell them to hook it up to vacuum, and they think that, oh, I can just hook it up into my cold air intake. No, that's not. Although that may be a vacuum leak, if it's not hooked up properly, like if you have a coupler or something messed up, it's not actual manifold reference vacuum, which is what we mean when we say hook it up to vacuum.
It's more like like an atmospheric reference almost, and it's metered air because it's after the mass air sensor, so it's proper in that respect, but it's not enough vacuum to make your brakes work or to make these vacuum motors for the IMRCs, CMCVs work. So I think there's two things that hook up to the cold air that I can think of off the top of my head. And there may be three on an automatic car, but there's the PCV system. That's actually pulling fresh air into the crankcase, and of course it's after the filter and it's after the mass air, so it's the proper way to pull in fresh air. And then there's the brake aspirator connection.
The brake aspirator.
Are there any more connections on the?
I want to say there's one for, like traditionally on a 1517, there's one for like manifold reference.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of them that come up and attach to the cold air intake tube. Like you get a couple extra fittings with a JLT with little hoses and connectors popped onto them. But
the vacuum ports on the cold air have a very, very specific purpose. And of course I mentioned the brakes, and I said a couple different things, but on 15 up and on 11 to 14 automatics, the brakes get two references. There's a brake aspirator that gets a true vacuum reference from after the throttle body, and then there's a reference from before the throttle body, and that actual pressure drop helps the brake booster get more total vacuum.
Yeah, because at idle you have about 10 to 12 psi of engine vacuum in here, and in between the throttle body and the filter, if you have a bad filter, you may have like 1 psi of vacuum in there, but on a good filter you're not really going to have any pressure drop at idle.
But when you're doing this 18 intake manifold install, you want your CMCVs to work, IMRCs, CMCVs, kind of the same thing. You've got to use a true vacuum reference after the throttle body. Same thing goes for boost gauges, fuel pressure regulators.
All that stuff.
Anything important?
Yeah, but I just figured I'd tackle that while we had everyone's attention, and I guess now we'll go to taking some questions.
We have a bunch of comments. Just Dale says, good afternoon. The Goblin says, what's up?
What's up, guys?
What's up? Andrew Sheridan says that you're looking pretty today, Joe.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Speaking of which, he needs a connector off your desk.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Sorry, Carrie.
Oh, sorry. Dale says, ported versus stock. Don't want to give it away yet, do we?
No.
Can't give it away just yet.
We have the details though.
Matt noticed that Thor was back.
Thor is always here. He's always in our presence.
So pretty excited.
Joe's a big like Marvel fan, right?
Yeah, I would say I'm not like a comic nerd level fan, but I love the movies, and I love a lot of the like lore behind it.
Yeah, I'm like a sci-fi fan, but like a little more like old school sci-fi stuff. So
A Trekkie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nothing wrong with being a Trekkie.
Michael Tolley says, Joe. Ken Ingram is waving at you guys.
Hey, Ken.
Debbie
Hi,
Camacho says, thumbs up. Wonder if she's, Debbie, are you related to Joey? Yeah, it looks like it. So we have a number of questions coming in, mostly on YouTube this week. Joe says, my question is, there anything to gain while using the Gen 3 going from VMP twin 67 throttle body in JLT 123 to a VMP 160 throttle body in JLT 148 and leaving the 2.4 upper?
So like on a GT500,
GT500
if they got a 2.4 upper.
I'd say there's decent gains with that, probably in the realm of 15, 20 horsepower. If you were like 2.4 and a 15% or 2.4 and a 10%, they'd probably be higher.
I mean, a big monoblade, yeah, in a situation, so a 2.4 upper only is a pretty mild combo in GT500 world. And, you know, that's, well, it's mild for a 2.3.
For Gen 3 world.
Yeah, for Gen 3 world, it's like another 3 or 4 pounds up, but that's another story. But, yeah, I mean, from a monoblade over a twin 67, like 20 rear wheel horsepower is pretty standard.
In the cold air intake, I don't think the cold air intake on a Gen 2 would really be a quote-unquote restriction. If you were running the 123, the 148 would just give you more headroom going down the road.
No Limits Racing says, hey guys, love the show. Got a 12 GT500, 123 JLT stock blower, 2.6 pulley, and twin 67 throttle body, VMP tuned. Just started drag racing and data logging. I've noticed that at Watt, it jumps to 1.0 knock at 4,700 RPM. It says it stays at the 1.0 knock for the entire pool, about 20 degrees of timing. Is the knock hurting my power?
Ish. It's hurting in the measure of about a degree, maybe 1.5 degrees of timing, depending on what we're calling out in your file. But the GT500s are so finicky with that stuff. If you're on a 2.6 upper pulley, seeing 20 degrees, you should be good as long as you're on 93, and even then on 91, that's still pretty conservative.
Yeah, you're pretty much in the ballpark of like where we want things to be with our tune, and where, you know, we want, where you're going to make best power too. Like 20 to 22 degrees on a stock blower is a pretty good ignition timing number.
David Zurinsky says, I have a 12 GT500 with a Gen 3. Currently with a 160 throttle body and 123 JLT CAI. Want to upgrade to the 173 throttle body and a larger CAI. Do you guys see an advantage of a DD 149 over the JLT 148?
Did he say how much power he's making on the setup he's currently on? Because it's, to me, that stuff isn't really necessary unless you're shooting for 1,000 wheel.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the stuff that people do when they're going for like that last little bit. They get into the really big cold airs, and I think either one would, you know, fit into that category of getting that last little bit.
Yeah, and I'd say I wouldn't, like the 170 is something I'd pair with something 148 millimeters or larger, just because if you're going big on the throttle body, you may as well go big with the cold air. But is it, if you're already on the 160 and like a 123 cold air, how much are you going to gain? Probably in the same realm of what we just talked about, maybe 20 horsepower. But it really depends on how hard you're pushing the combo already. If you're only at like 17, 18 pounds, I don't think it's going to gain 20, probably closer to like 15 at that level. But make your decision, I guess.
LP says 03 Cobra with a 2.3 TVS. Due to elevation, 3,800 feet, an engine combo, 2.8 upper, 4 pound lower. I'm only seeing 18-ish pounds. Would it be okay to spin my TVS any faster to get 20 pounds of boost?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, because from a blower speed standpoint, you're getting up there, but from a boost standpoint, you're not really in that realm of hurting stuff yet.
And then there's the Cobras like the belt on a Cobra slips really easy, so you're almost getting to the point where like a 2.8, like I don't know that it'll take a 2.7 or a 2.6 and not slip.
Yeah, I'd probably go bigger on the lower, like a 6 pound lower.
Yeah.
But I'd have to look at the blower drive speed calculator.
I've worked out some of that math before. It's not as bad as one would think, just because the Cobra has so much lower over red line than the Coyote, and some other little factors like that.
Yeah, instead of spending 8,000, you're at 6,500, so you get a little headroom there.
Yeah, and I mean, you figure like a Coyote with like a 69 millimeter pulley is like a 2.6 upper essentially, but you don't have as big of a lower on a Coyote till you go to one of the overdrive balancer pulleys that we make, and then the Coyote stuff I think is equivalent to like a 2 or 3 pound lower.
I'd have to look at the calculator again.
It's hard on Coyotes and GT500s. You can't get as big of a lower as you do on an 03 Cobra. But I would say a 6 pound. If we were going to render an opinion here, right here on the show, I'd say a 6 pound. Give that a try.
I'm trying to see if it's R or R4. Anyway, a 2011 GT500 throwing a code that I can't figure out. It's P1228 FORD. Wastegate failed open under pressure. Has EGR delete and runs fine even under boost. The code just started a week after a couple of months.
So it sounds like the SIP sensor isn't shut off in the tune, because if you did an EGR delete, that's the whole thing that measures manifold pressure and inlet pressure. So
Ford uses the EGR assembly to measure vacuum before the blower for proper EGR function.
So you get pressure drop across EGR valve.
Yeah, and to calculate potential wastegate failed for warranty concerns, which wastegate is bypass valve in that application. So yeah, that's one of the, amongst other reasons, that's one of the reasons that we don't like taking EGR off, because it's kind of built into the logic in a lot of ways, and there's various ways to disable that SIP functionality logic to accommodate that off-road only application. But yeah, I would get with your tuner on that. I don't know why it's only started to happen. That's one of those things that somehow you were just over the threshold and it just now decided to set a code.
Yeah.
Set a hard code, because there are soft codes that'll just float.
Pending codes that'll just sit there for
a
drive cycles on end.
Yeah, I never actually set a check engine light.
David Ray says a 17 GT Gen2R, 85 millimeter long tube headers on 93 octane. Which will make more power, swapping to an 82 millimeter pulley or moving up to the twin 67 throttle body from a twin 60? How much more power will each of these choices net? Thanks.
He said he was 85 millimeter pulley.
Yeah,
Talking
85.
about going 82.
He's on an 85 currently.
I can tell you the pulley is going to be cheaper by a long shot.
At the end of the day, you're probably going to do both.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say step one, throw a pulley on it, and then when you have that smaller pulley on it, it's just going to make that much more of a difference when the twin 67's on there. Yeah,
I mean, the more air you need, the more you stand to benefit from reducing.
Opening up supercharger inlet restrictions. But to, I guess, more directly answer your question, 10 to 15 horsepower with the pulley and probably closer to 10 with the throttle body at the level that you'd be pulling it at an 82 millimeter pulley.
But once you go down to a 79 millimeter pulley, potentially a little...
15?
Yeah, potentially a little more from the throttle body.
So, Poor Boy wants to know, what are your thoughts on the Boostane? I think he means Boostane.
That's my thoughts. 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, run that stuff.
Works
I've been
well.
doing stuff on the dyno with it. Joe's been doing stuff on the dyno.
Speaking of which, it looks like we might be having a Boostane representative here in September. So, Ford Tuning Tuesday. So,
nice.
And we keep Boostane in stock, and if you order it before noon, we try to ship it out the same day. If you really need it to go out the same day, just give us a call and let us know, or drop us a line after you order.
And we have pre right now. I think we ordered Pro last week. We may have gotten that in.
Okay.
Because we had Pro sold out, and then we reordered Pro, and I think we just got it this week.
Cool. And by the way, you can't overnight. You can't airship Boostane for the record.
For somewhat obvious reasons.
Yeah, I can only go ground shipping.
John says, hi Joe, hi Justin. John
Hola.
from Illinois with the 2017 GT Gen3. Thanks Joe for the tune update. You asked me to keep my eyes on the cats. What should I look for, and how do I know if there's a problem?
Tricky. What I meant by keep an eye on them is make sure that if you're going to be doing extended watt pulls, that you're just conscientious of the fact that you have cats on the car. If you hear the tone of the car, audibly change at watt, or if you hear audible detonation, immediately let out. It usually means you killed a cat.
Yeah, and extended watt, quarter mile isn't, it's hard on things, but it's not too hard. It's half-mile racing, trying to find out what your car's top speed is on the highway.
Or doing back-to-back third and fourth gear pulls, racing someone, roll racing on the street. I'd say if you don't have a good 5-10 minutes between the pulls, you stand a pretty high risk in melting one of the cats down.
Nick says, asking for a friend, 4.6 3-valve, non-intercooled Paxton, hot rod cams and full exhaust. He is considering adding snow or AEM meth injection to control IATs. My vote was the intercooler. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are similar. I'd rather see an intercooler on something, because the intercooler is always going to be working to bring IATs down, whereas a meth injection kit is only going to work reactively at Watt or wherever you have it triggered to turn on.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. If you do the intercooler and you don't do it well, it really hurts the centrifugal cars.
Yeah, because then you have a giant heat sink at the front of the car if it's not effectively pulling heat out of itself.
And it can lose, like, if the piping is, like, every bend you lose a little bit, and then the intercooler core you lose a little bit. Not just from okay, you lose boost because you're cooling the air. That's just the laws of physics. But beyond that, you lose boost from restriction of the path now being this much longer. And you need to convert to blow through so the mass air is close to the engine. You need to keep the bypass valve away from the mass air. You need to have a big enough bypass valve because now when you shut the throttle, you get a pressure wave that goes back through the whole intercooler system. So there's just a lot of little stuff. Like, it's possible to do it and engineer it well. If Paxton has a setup, I'd probably just buy their setup.
So Daryl says, I just put a stock 18 Manny on my 2015 TT S550 and gained second on the track. Same boost level, minor fueling changes.
So did he say like 0.10?
No, it says 2 TH.
Okay, so 2 tenths.
Oh, 2 tenths.
Okay.
Yep, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with the 18 manifold is the power curve doesn't drop off at high RPM. It has like a bigger runner. I think the plenum's different. There's a bunch of little changes that it just gives you a broader power band, which is when you see the most gains in a situation like that. Especially
a turbo car at the track. If you can stay, like, if his shift point was 7,200 before with the stock manifold, bump it up to like 7,700 on the 18 manifold and see what it does.
Bubba Blue says he's got a 2012 GT. This weekend I had a drag racing event, and while I do great off the line, after the 8th is where I'm lacking. Would an 18 intake manifold help? And I took down an 18 SS, was it 1 LE 2 times?
So I would really want to see logs, because in order to know if you're going to benefit from an 18 manifold in the 8th mile, we have to know what problem specifically you're having after the 8th mile with the way the car's set up. Because we can't tell you that you're going to benefit at the 8th mile if there's another issue causing the car to slow down at the 8th. Are your knock sensors going crazy? Are you +4 on knock going through the 8th?
Was he saying after the 8th or up to the 8th?
I think up to the 8th it was doing fine.
Yeah, he said he's doing great off the line. It's after the 8th is when I'm lacking.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So yeah, at the top end, kind of, well, the power on the top end of the track.
And if he's talking about running the naturally aspirated intake, all right, are you running a ProCharger setup with the stage 1 intercooler? Because you'll be probably 140 IAT2 by the time you get to the 8th, and if your tuner's really aggressive with the IAT retard function, then they could fall off bad on the back half.
Yeah.
Andrew wants to know, do y'all tune NA cars?
Sure do.
Absolutely.
A lot of them. I want to say it was a lot. I won't do numbers, but it was a lot last quarter.
Braden says, hey there, watch the show every week up in Alberta, Canada.
Awesome, man.
He has an 07 3-valve GT with a Saleen blower, hot rod cam, short tubes, no cats. Feels like spark is blowing out high RPM at high gear, gapped at 30. He says he will add Petro-Canada 94 octane. So and then he wants to know, he goes, is it weak coils? Open up the gap, no knock when it happens. He says timing is at 17 degrees.
With a 3-valve, the first thing I would look at, especially with an older Saleen kit like that, is making sure that the intercooler pump's working. Circling back to that IAT retard function we talked about with the last question, I don't know what your tuner is doing from an IAT retard standpoint, but if you're 17 degrees of timing at 180 downstream, then you're probably having a pretty big issue there. So step 1, check to make sure your intercooler pump is flowing properly and that your IATs are at a reasonable temperature. And then you really shouldn't be having spark blowout at 30 thousandths as long as the plug's good on a setup like that, because most of the Saleen kits are 8 to 10 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, the Saleen kits are nothing crazy. I mean, like Joe said, the intercooler pump, and because if your air temp either gets high and the computer pulls timing or doesn't pull timing, you're just not going to make power, and it's going to fall way off. The thing to like remember with spark blowout is it's very different than detonation or knock or pre-ignition. It's to us, they sound different. You know, spark blowout is very defined, I think, once it happens, once you get into enough boost. And the way to think about it is there's just not enough spark energy to jump that gap at that higher power level, pressure level, RPM level. Whereas detonation is usually a little more random and very detrimental.
Yeah, very detrimental.
Well, of course, the word of caution here is always use factory coil packs.
Yeah, always use those. And if you want to data log it and just kind of look at to have something to look for in a data log to kind of give you the idea if you're getting spark blowout or not, data log bank 1 front sensor and bank 2 front sensor O2 voltage. And if you isolate the area where you're wide open throttle and you're having your issue, so like zoom in on that region and you graph O2 voltage, your O2 voltage should be like 0.87 or above, anywhere from 0.87 to 1.0. If it's like 1.05 or 1.10, you probably are running a little too rich. But circle back, if you see your O2 voltage looking like a seismograph at watt, you have blowout or some really bad detonation. Usually blowout, but that's an easy way to tell.
Yeah, spark misfires, spark blowout misfires, same thing. They show up as on a wideband, either a narrow band O2 sensor or a wideband O2 sensor as being lean, and they're really quick blips that honestly don't naturally occur for any other reason than spark blowout. And a lot of times with a bad coil, you can isolate it to one bank or the other.
Yeah. I still want to do a function that determines when number 1 fires based on RPM, and you can graph it so that it just like indicates when bank 1 fires on there, so that you can see you can try to match up the frequency with which you're getting blowout to determine whether it's one cylinder or multiple.
That'd be really cool.
It'd be fun.
No Limits Racing, who had asked earlier about whether or not the knock is hurting his power, said this hopefully you won't be on stock too much longer. He's looking at a Gen 3 all the way. Keep up the great work, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Randall Robbins says, can you tune a 13 Boss gray key for 93 oct and red key for E85?
Ooh.
I don't think stoic point is able to be changed on the keys.
So I did like a Boss track key calibration. I had to use HP Tuner's Engage to do it because SCT does not support tuning the individual keys. Yeah, I went through a lot of the tables. The Boss track key is all about improving the feel of the performance and, of course, the cam lobe deal. So, but there's not. So the way the track key works is they duplicated a lot of the important tables that they wanted to change, and they trigger them based off the key. But they don't duplicate everything. So tuning for E85 and 93 on the track key like that is not an option. Yeah,
and if you wanted to do like a race gas that's a similar stoic point to 93, or not to 93, but to gasoline, and so like a pump gas and a race gas tune, not on red key and on red key, I think that's absolutely possible.
Yeah, because we've got access to the timing tables.
And I was telling it was a Paxton 2200 supercharged Boss I did on the dyno last week, Dale's car, or Herschel, whichever name he wants to go by. I was telling him that in theory, I could do that for him. It'd just be a bit more money to do like a race gas on the red key and then like a pump gas on the gray key.
Right.
But we had already kind of like planned on doing SCT and kind of budgeted time for that. So it was like, if it's something you decide you want down the road and you're willing to pay for it, then we could talk about it. But as of right now, this is kind of where we're at.
Yeah, let us know on the front end.
Nick says, do you guys know anyone running the Watson Racing IRS on an S550 Gen?
So I know someone that was considering it. I know that you're not doing that now. You kind of have a custom suspension setup back there, but do you know anyone else running that Watson setup?
I know it's finally available. It's been available for about a year. Not in the rear. Like, I know a couple people running the Watson front end, and we've actually got one on the shelf that if somebody wants to buy, we'll make a deal on. But the Watson rear end, I mean, a lot of nice piece, a lot of engineering, like $15,000 worth of engineering, I think.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 10 to 15,000. I mean, it's the best of the best, but it's a lot. We do have kind of a more budget, an option. So all the 15 up IRS stuff is essentially modular, and the aftermarket has approached it from such a standpoint where you can do upgraded axles with the stock 8.8 diff. You can do an upgraded 9-inch differential, and then have access to all the 9-inch options and 9-inch IRS differential. I talked to a guy that is going to make a lightweight factory style cradle with all the factory mounts and stuff like that. So, you know, you save like 15 pounds or something. And of course, Rebecca's new car is going to have a solid axle 9-inch conversion, which is going to be a little more involved for people that are, you know, looking at running in the 8s and the 7s, honestly.
Which I've seen people do with the IRS, but those are very high horsepower cars.
Yeah. It's still 60 foot, just kind of like
1.2s-ish.
average. Yeah, not like ludicrous 60 foots.
Yeah.
Eric says, what would I need to install besides AFR gauge to get an E85 tune from y'all on a 99 Cobra?
Depending on what's done to the 99 Cobra, you don't even really have to install an AFR gauge. If you're stock MAF, stock injectors, and just kind of a simple setup, I don't know that I'd require an AFR gauge, but if you're aftermarket MAF, aftermarket injectors, stuff like that, then yeah. I'd say email support with a more targeted question on what's done to the car and whatnot. We can let you know if you need that or not.
Okay, so here's a question that Justin, I think you'll be able to answer to, because I think it's going to be interesting considering of what we've been working on. Aaron wants to know VMP or Hellion.
We just did a video about that. I mean, I've heard it go both ways recently.
Different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
I think neither you or I is specifically against turbo. I think we're all smart people here. We know what works on what application. I think for a really fun street car that you take to the track to play around with some friends, a PD blower is very reliable and very fun. If you're, I don't know, again, even turbo cars can be good for that too, but I'd say generally speaking, there's usually less headaches with a PD blower car than there is a turbo car. Circling back to that, the Paxton car blowing boost couplers and stuff, and the devil's advocate might argue, well, if you have a nice turbo kit, you don't have to worry about boost couplers blowing off and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you could have a wastegate hose fail, lose a motor to a wastegate. You're never really going to overboost with a PD blower unless you put a pulley on it that's too small.
But you consciously had to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, our technology is really about being something that we can ship you in 4 boxes and you can install at home in a weekend. I mean, you don't even really need a lift. You know, it's easier to get the bumper off if the car's a couple inches off the ground. But
from an emission standpoint,
yeah, we don't mess with any of the emission systems. So, you know, and we can make a ton of power. You know, the turbo stuff I find is a little more race oriented, or people that really just have to say, I have twin turbos.
Yeah.
I mean, that started, I remember my uncle telling me that his brother, my other uncle, got a twin turbo RX-7. This would have been like the late 80s, early 90s. Like, that was the stuff to have.
Yeah.
A twin turbo car.
Twin turbo rotary at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you had a twin turbo V6 Mustang.
Yeah, twin turbo V6 Mustang. It was fast. It was the only way to make a V6 Mustang fast.
Yeah.
Any drivability issues with your, let's see, someone's having issues, any drivability issues with the 160 throttle body? I've heard the monoblades are difficult to tune.
All monoblades are going to be they're going to be more sensitive than twin blade throttle bodies. we're only recommending our mono 160 and 173 for very specific applications at this point.
I'd say the applications that we say they're compatible with, there's no specific drivability issue. It's when you put them on a car that has stock cams and is small displacement that you ever really have issues with it. And it's not really drivability issues so much as it's fail-safe issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's just don't put a bigger throttle body than something needs on it and then want it to drive like better than stock.
No Limits Racing says one last question. Looking at the fuel pump duty cycle shows 0.42 at watt. This correlates to 84% duty cycle, right? Because it has to be multiplied by 2. Thanks again.
That's accurate.
That's correct. Sorry, I just said the same thing as you.
It's all good. We said the same thing.
I mansplained it to you.
You mansplained it to me?
Zach Meyer says a 2018 Mustang Auto with supercharger. Should I do oil pump gears?
That's interesting because it's the 2018.
It is, and I know where that 2018 currently is.
Oh, it's a silver 2018.
It's a silver 2018, but should you? I don't think it's absolutely necessary on your setup. I saw recently where someone had posted a oil pump gear failure, not oil pump gear, a crank sprocket failure on an 18 that was still under warranty and stuff. But I'd say by and large, automatic 2018, I wouldn't really worry about oil pump gears.
The word on the street is that there's probably a running change at the plant and that 18s are getting a better crank sprocket at some, camshaft sprocket at some point. And that those parts will be available to the aftermarket once that, once they're available. Yeah. And that just makes me think maybe the oil pump gear is going to get a little better too, but that wasn't necessarily a huge warranty issue, sort of.
I guess
don't
we'll
know.
see.
Yeah.
Steve Patterson says, I have a BPS twin 73mm throttle body for an 08 GT500. I have heard they are difficult to tune. Do you have any experience with this throttle body?
So, as Joe mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily difficult to tune. It's the expectations of the driver, right, first. And then it's the specific situations in which that hardware may work best or may not work best. And to get a little more technical with it, I guess since this has come up twice already, you have a bigger throttle body, so you have more area for airflow leakage around the blade. So what is the computer is a closed loop control system at idle. So a stock engine needs a fixed amount of air to idle, a very small amount of air, honestly. So
yeah,
this
GT500 is like 0.8 to 1.2 pounds a minute of airflow at idle.
Yeah. So this little, we'll say the little twin 60 throttle body doesn't have a whole lot of air leakage around the blade. It may idle at like a couple of degrees. You put one of these big throttle bodies on there, the computer tries to close it all the way, keep going. Now this throttle's at 0 degrees, and the computer still wants it closed to close it more to get the idle speed down more. And where do you go anymore?
You yank idle spark down, that's about it.
Yeah, and that's sometimes not enough. And in the case of this 73, if it's worked before and it's working well, then I would leave it alone. But if you bought an aftermarket throttle body on the used market, there's usually a reason why.
Yeah, usually.
EJ says, which is the best throttle body for a 2010 GT500?
I guess that falls into the category of tool for the job.
Tool for the job.
It's like, well, what's the best throttle body? Well, the stock one's pretty damn good if you're talking about drivability and stuff like that. But if you're talking about performance, it's do you need a sharp knife or do you need an axe? If you need an axe, monoblade's your boy. If you need a sharp knife, twin 67.
I mean, our twin 67, it's as far as airflow potential and stuff, it's right there in the middle of the range, and it comes with electronics already on it, assembled, tested. They're actually made from stock throttle body cores, so we take a stock twin 60 and it gets disassembled and gutted and all that stuff goes into a twin 67. So you get like a bolt-on package that's ready to go. That's like kind of been our claim to fame, is that it's easy.
Eric says, what's up, VMP people? Will you be at the Cobra Jet Race in Norwalk this weekend?
We won't, but VMP is supposed to be represented on a car that is racing there.
Nice, nice.
Einar says, what is your thought on vacuum pumps? I heard Steve Dinnan, BMW guru, talk about the benefits in a podcast, and he talked about big benefits, and that was with an NA motor. It is then bigger benefit on a boost.
So if Travis is watching, Travis will appreciate this. Anytime you can create negative pressure in the crankcase, whether it be at idle, part throttle, or watt, it's not a bad thing. If anything, you're helping the engine pump air by not having pressure on the other side of the piston.
Oil, or go ahead.
Everything really is helped by a vacuum pump. The issue is that you don't really see a lot of modern guys doing that. I find that was something that people played around with in the 90s, and it's not that the technology is no longer applicable so much as it is kind of forgotten about.
And I wonder, you know, it may have had a big necessity back then when ring technology wasn't as good. You know, cylinder roundness and other little things. It probably made up for a lot of that stuff. I know on really high horsepower cars, 1500 up, it's not uncommon to have a vacuum pump. And a lot of times it's part of the dry sump oiling system, so it's an extra stage. It's really simple. But, you know, like Joe was saying, I mean, everything gets better. The rings seal better. The oil system control is better. You know, you get less oil aeration in a drag racing or road racing situation. But
just makes it better, but then you got to weigh the cost versus return. If you spend $500–600 on a vacuum pump setup, is it worth what it's doing? If it's just a basic car, probably not. But if you're trying to get every last ounce of horsepower out of a setup, and you've hit a limit here, hit a limit there, and hit a limit there, then throw a vacuum pump on it.
I mean, a lot of it comes from class racing where you can't run a bigger turbo, you can't do this, you can't do that. But there's no rule against having a vacuum pump.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you need another 5 horsepower or 10 horsepower on a 1,000, 1,500 horsepower car, that's it.
Yeah.
And all your competitors are doing it.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm copying a question real quick over.
It's all good. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe.
Yes, we haven't said that in a while. Poor Boy wants to know, would you guys be able to tune a 2015 Ford Exploder Sport?
Would we physically have the capability to do so? Absolutely. I haven't done it yet. I don't know if you have.
I don't think the Sport's the EcoBoost one generally.
Yeah.
We'd probably just do a preloaded tune for that, or even see if one of our EcoBoost tuning partners like MPT has a custom tune ready to go, and we'd just take care of you that way.
Hector says, I have a 17 GT with Roush catback intake, 90mm BBK throttle, SCT programmer. What would be my next mod? Thanks, from Puerto Rico.
Put the stock throttle buddy on. Next mod, long tube headers, or an intake manifold, which you can decide which one you want based on this video that we did for the test that's about to come out.
Or both.
Yeah, or both. The only other thing you can really do at that point is E85. That's a relatively easy upgrade, but whether or not E85 is worth it is kind of dependent on how good your fuel quality is already. If you're on like Puerto Rico, usually the fuel quality is decent, but if you're on like a 91, going to E85 is a decent gain. If you're on really good quality 93, it's kind of like a mediocre, mild gain. More so a consistency thing than anything else. By consistency, I mean spark, not consistency in ethanol content. Which brings me to another topic. Hey, I have a stock cold air intake. I put your E85 tune on. Here's a data log. Hey, your fuel trims are 0.75 long term and 0.83 short term. Are you sure you have E85? What was your mixture ratio? How much fuel did you have in it when you filled up with E85? Just because you put E85 in the tank does not mean what is entering the fuel injectors and the fuel rail is actually E85. Be mindful of that.
Usually, like any fuel change, we do a dyno pull to get, if we're tuning on the dyno and swapping fuels, we use a dyno pull to get everything mixed in. I've actually been on the dyno where I watch the fuel chims change mid-pull.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll do like a light pull on the 93 tune before I even switch it to the E85 tune. Like for example's sake, for this whole ethanol content debacle, if you put 13 gallons of pure E85 in your tank and you have a 15.7 gallon tank, and let's just say you pull up to the station, you fill up with the E85 and it stops at 13 gallons, you have about 2.7 to 3 gallons of gasoline-based fuel still in your fuel tank. So if you average all of that out, you're at about 72% ethanol content total. When you factor in the amount of fuel you had now mixed with E85, your total ethanol content is now 72, not E85.
Yeah, so I mean, you're a little, you're going to be a little bit rich. Fuel trims are going to compensate for it on the first tank, but if you're expecting it to be perfect, only expect it to be perfect.
Aaron says, Aaron who asked about VMP or the Hellion, he says he's torn, he likes both. There's a couple of Hellion cars he runs around with that pretty much outrun or run with everything in Mexico.
I bet turbo cars are strong cars when they're built right and they're tuned solid. I will say that we recently had a guy with a Hellion single kit, or I shouldn't say Hellion because I don't know for a fact that it was Hellion. But he had a turbo kit on his car and he had issues with oil drain back and tearing up turbo seals all the time. And he pulled that turbo kit off his car and put a Gen 3 on. And from what I've heard, he's nothing but smiles, not worrying about the oil drain back issues or anything that he had previously with the turbo setup.
If you've already gone down that road of one power adder, you probably aren't afraid to run a lot of boost. You might have a built motor. You're probably on E85. And Gen 3 shines. I mean, it makes 800-900 wheel without trying hard, honestly.
That and no real reliability or maintenance drama.
No,
it just kind of works.
Yeah.
Mike just chimed in and said it was a Hellion.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if it was an early Hellion kit or something was buggy with the install, but
I had oil issues with my V6, and I think there's better pumps on the oil scavenge pumps available on the market today, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Fernando says, any info on Jackal return style fuel system for E85? Is it any good to buy or use for cheap?
Jackal return style fuel system, so he's talking 1314 GT500?
I don't know. That might be Livernoise's drop-in pump.
Okay.
Yeah, might be. I don't know.
And if it's a drop-in pump and it looks like a Ford style hat, it's GT350 pumps or GT500 pumps?
It might even be an 18 pump. If
Okay.
it's
He
still a
says
single
yes.
pump.
He chimed in yes, so you must be guessing right.
Okay, so it's, I believe the system from Livernois is a single pump.
Okay.
I think, and it could be like an upgraded pump. I know that's what Tony Luceri's car has with a 82 or 85 millimeter pulley, nothing crazy.
On Gen 3?
Yeah, on Gen 3.
Okay.
So
I'd really think that car would be faster. I know that he's in Arizona, so I think he's at a little bit of elevation, but
yeah.
Because I want to say where he was, it was like, because we have another customer out there. I want to say it's at least 1,500 feet, maybe as high as 3,000
Yeah.
where he's at, but I don't know. Throw some more pulley at it. Have fun.
Andrew Vizen says, hold on, he must have been responding to something earlier. We'll go on to the next one because it's not saying. It says they're not as much of an issue as the clutch fork warranties are for the 18 manuals.
Oh man, I've heard some stories.
The 18 manual clutch has got issues?
Not the clutch forks.
Oh, in the transmission,
Or by
yeah.
clutch forks, I mean, I think you meant shift forks.
Shift forks, yep.
Yeah.
Okay. We are going to have Mantic clutches for the 18.
Oh, man.
The flywheel is different on 18, so that keeps you from using a 15 to 17 setup because a bunch of little things change because of that.
Was it the bolt pattern on the crank that was different, or are you talking about using using the flywheel as a mounting fixture for the twin disc clutch?
So Jeff actually said that the pilot bearing is now in the flywheel instead of in the crankshaft.
That's so weird.
On 18, yeah.
That's really weird.
So Mantic has designed a twin disc, both a metallic and an organic for 18 up. And we're going to get some of those on the shelf here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Go good with some Calumet transmissions.
Jeff says, what do you think about the intake manifold benefits with a Century or turbo? We're all pretty well aware of the benefits of NA.
I feel like the power adder is just going to compound the gains that you see naturally aspirated, because all you're doing with a power adder is adding atmosphere. So
You want to flow better.
multiply gains, profit.
Poor boy wants to know, how do you guys feel about stiffener subframe support?
I assume he's talking about the like matrix system that they have for like S197 chassis stuff, or is he talking about like?
Probably, yeah.
I feel like that stuff works fine.
Yeah, it looks nice, gives you a jacking point.
And the S197s don't really have the jacking point issues that the SN95s do, but to that same end, it's still nice to have a solid jacking point. I know that someone else has had some good experience with the Stifler's like matrix kit that goes from the pinch weld to the frame to the pinch weld to the frame.
Oh yeah.
Using it as a slider.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, that the S197 and the S550 is a pretty darn solid car, so it's not like the old SN95s where you had to do some frame stiffening.
Yeah, if you didn't do frame stiffening, you can pick the front left side up probably a foot before the back tire comes off the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas S550, it seems like you get it up like 6 inches and the back tire is already coming up.
Ryan says, would you recommend a crank overdrive pulley on an 08 Shelby GT500 stock engine, E85 VMP Gen2 2.5 pulley? What type of gains are typical?
With the 85, definitely do a lower on that car. Get some blower speed up, because I think he said he's only 2.5 upper. So you could even do a 2.4 and a lower if you're really wanting to party on E85. Typical gains are commensurate with the boost increase. So like a 10% lower would probably be about 20-30 horsepower, a 15% lower like 30-35.
Yeah, and each 5% is equivalent to 1 pulley size or a pound of boost. When I say 1 pulley size, that's 3 millimeter or about 0.1 of an inch. I know the math doesn't work out exactly, but we do pulley sizes 1/10 of an inch instead of 1/8 of an inch. Just the way it works out. But you know, something to think about, and I mentioned this in one of my stories, is that with in one of the videos that's going to be coming out soon, is that with Gen 3, like I've only found a need to do a lower pulley if I'm trying to make like 1,000 horsepower. I mean, I've made 800 wheel on a couple GT500s now without touching the lower pulley. And like the lower pulley is not a big deal, but if you're doing your work yourself and you know, it's $500-600 and then plus the belt, and whether you do the install yourself or you have somebody do it, now you got $1,000 sunk into it. Yeah,
maybe one of those situations where it's worth it to pull the Gen 2 off and throw a Gen 3 on, mixed with like trade-in and stuff like that. Are we still doing the trade-in program?
We're still doing the trade-in program. Trade-in's going strong on, we basically take any working rear inlet TVS blower from VMP or Roush. And technically for the GT500 people, a Ford Racing would fall under a Gen 1, a Ford Racing TVS.
Okay.
I know we haven't like heard about those in a while because gosh, they've been off the market for 8 years, but
that's crazy to think
there were
about.
over 1,000 of them made. It was a successful program. You know what? I was in sales and support. Somebody's like, I got a 2009 a KR with a 605 horsepower Ford Racing blower. I'm like, oh, okay, nice. We can upgrade that.
Yeah, Mike actually showed me a picture of a customer's engine bay the other day, and I saw the metric cap screw front nose drive with the vanes in it. I'm like, oh, it's a Harrop nose drive.
Yeah, made in Australia. That's kind of where all this stuff started.
Yeah.
Ryan says, would you recommend a crank overdrive pulley on an 08 Shelby? Is that the one we just read?
Yeah.
It is.
That Nick I talked a bunch about.
I'm sorry?
That I just talked forever about.
That's okay. Nick says, like, share, and subscribe. Installing my twin jet 67 and fuel pump boosters tonight on the GT500. Swapped GT. Keep up the great work and wish me luck.
Awesome.
Nice.
Good to hear.
Luck, man.
You stupid shit says, can you guys tune the new 2650 Roush blower for the F-150?
We can.
Just goes right on there.
He also says he has an 18 F-150 with a Roush catback and 2650 supercharger, obviously. Goal is 600 to the wheel. What can I add? SW or ARH headers?
Either?
I'd have to check with both of those manufacturers and see if they make a header for 18 yet.
Yeah, we're a dealer for both. We can get them ordered for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if we tune it, we're going to use an HP Tuner's N-Gauge, just as a side note.
Yeah.
Einar, who was asking about your thought on vacuum pumps, says, thanks guys for the good answer, but what about the wheel spacers? No. I promise not to ask ever again the same question. Sorry, Joe, for getting on your nerves. Sometimes I can't watch live.
It's all good. No wheel spacers, Einar. Or you can run the wheel spacers, they're just not going to cause wheel hop.
Poor Boy says, you guys rock. Just let me know when you want to trade labor for Gen 2 quit for 2013.
That was that person from last week.
Yeah. Yeah, Poor Boy's always watching.
He's always watching, yeah. And Robert says, does the buyback program include the Gen 2 for the Terminator? The reason why I asked is because I was told it's only for the S550s when I called.
Yeah, it does not include the, no, it does not include the Terminator. And honestly, that is for your protection. That Terminator market is really close-knit. Like, you ought to be able to sell your Gen 2 Terminator blower for a lot of money, honestly. Probably like $2,000 at least. So go and do that rather than shipping it to us.
Exactly.
For the Coyote and the GT500, there have been so many versions of TVS over the years, from the early VMP Gen 1s with the two-piece elbow to the Roush stuff, that we're just like, all right, we're going to open this up, because those people, they have a hard time selling their stock blowers.
That, and in the case of 5 liters, you can't just bolt a blower onto a naturally aspirated car, so it's hard to sell just a separate blower.
Yeah, it's really, really hard for the 5-liter people to sell a blower by itself. So we wanted to have that program to, take care of them.
Avery's text says, how bad is it really to run headers / no cats without a tune?
It's not bad at all. It'll be fine.
There's another one where we both answer.
Exactly. We're both on point.
Mike just chimed in and said it's not bad. And with that said, all the questions are done, and we're at 2:33.
Man,
hey,
that's so weird.
It's been a great time.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
I guess like, share, and subscribe in the meantime.
Yes, like, share, and subscribe.
Like, share, subscribe, and if you guys have any ideas or things you want us to cover or talk about, let us know, so you can hit us up. I'll put my email in the comments, and that way we can see about getting other guests maybe on here. We will have Boostane in the house in September, and we'll provide more information once it gets firmed up.
And if you missed any of the previous videos, we did a thing with Gen2R from HP Tuners last week, and the week before that, we did a video with
FTI.
I want to say it's Greg.
Greg from FTI Torque Converters. Yeah.
And then if you look even further back, we did an episode with FIC.
FIC, Power by the Hour, Jeff from Mantic. Everybody.
Yeah, we're trying to get everybody in here, so if there's anyone you want us to talk to, let us know.
Yep. Like, share, subscribe.
Have fun, guys.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.